From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt. Our colleague Noel is still on an adventure, but will be returning shortly.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal, Fagan. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know, friends and neighbors, fellow conspiracy realists. If you are tuning in the evening this publishes, let us be the first to welcome you to Monday, May 19th. Now, our friends over at Daily Zeitgeist, the legendary Miles and Jack, often like to begin their show by naming off a number of national days, right? Remember, Matt, you and I talked about this over the years. I think we were both befuddled by how ambiguous the process of creating a national day is in the United States, right? You just have to catch Congress at, the end of a session and say, everybody, you guys like sandwiches?
Yeah. It is a little weird because there are levels of official holiday in this country.
Right. We have very few holidays where the American worker actually gets the day off. And I do want to give reluctant but objective respect to the United Kingdom, where they straight up have holidays that are just called bank holidays. There's no religious implication. There's no, nationalistic implication. It's simply that the bank is closed.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And we have tax holidays.
We have tax holidays. And in the spirit of our pal, the legendary Miles Gray, who taught us this, if you're hearing this the day it publishes, this is, get this, Matt, May 19th in the United States. It's Frog Jumping Jubilee Day. It's Malcolm X Day. It's Hepatitis Testing Day. And it's Celebrate Your Elected Officials Day.
Why?
Which one?
Oh, well, all of them but Malcolm X.
All of them but Malcolm X. I'm tempted to agree with you. We had a brief conversation off mic whether or not we wanted to talk about one of the largest, most expensive gifts ever given to a U.S. president, an airplane. You've seen the news, as our brother Dylan pointed out. Jon Stewart has a hot 20 minutes on it, so check out that story. We wanted to start this conversation by asking ourselves if we play chess. Matt, Dylan, do you guys play chess?
Sometimes.
I thought you were going to sound like me talking about Tekken. I don't play.
Hey, no, I'm not amazing at chess. I do enjoy the game though. But my son is getting better and better every time we play.
Nice. Dylan says he's never learned chess, so this may be a chance for you and me and your son to, have a big win. I'm laughing because Dylan follows up and says he's a huge fan of checkers at Cracker Barrel. I love it too.
I just bought one of the giant ones. They call them carpet chess.
Yeah, you got
huge.
one?
Oh, I just got one so that the kids over here can play checkers.
Okay, yeah, it's the same board, right?
I got it from Cracker Barrel.
Amazing. And I believe you can still play checkers in Afghanistan. However, folks, fellow chess nerds, we have some news for you. You cannot play chess in Afghanistan anymore. It has been officially banned in the country, and this is due to not criminal concerns so much as religious considerations. So, yeah, this is up there with more, I think, activity or behavior policing on the part of the interim government. We'll go to comma.com by an article by Fidel Rahmati, which reads the following. Officials from the Ministry of Sports confirmed chess activities are suspended as of Sunday, May 11th. They had to find suitable answers regarding religious concerns. Right.
I'm seeing images of law enforcement officers there in Afghanistan going around, like listening really closely for the sound of the click.
Right.
The people taking turns. Yeah. Or like back rooms that you open up at some restaurant. You creak open a door and there's just a couple of guys huddled around going like,
a chess speakeasy.
Yeah,
exactly.
E7.
Right, in whispers. It seems that, at least according to conversations with Western analysts who definitely have their own bag of badgers, it seems that maybe the concerns are regarding some of the names of the pieces. I would imagine particularly the bishop. So maybe that in some way has scruffed the dander of these religious authorities. We'd love to hear more from you folks. We're moving quickly. Matt and I have many tales to tell today, things to share. We're going to talk a lot about resource extraction. We're going to talk about some legal conspiracies, some strange arrests. We may end by talking about the future of a non-human civilization. But before we do any of that, it is no secret that we here on Stuff They Don't Want You to Know travel often, which means we need airports to work. So we need airports to Newark. So we're going to pause for a word from our sponsors. And then what do you say? Want to dive into that one?
Yeah, let's take a flight or not. And we've returned. Let's take a little flight over to Newark, New Jersey, if anybody remembers that from SNL. But really, we're going to Philadelphia. We're going to the Philadelphia Terminal Radar Approach Control, or TRACON, as they call it. We're heading over there because that is the Philadelphia Terminal Radar Approach Control. That is the outfit that handles air traffic control for the Newark Airport, the very, very large airport there in Newark, New Jersey. There are a lot of flights that come in and out of that Newark Liberty International Airport, and when there are problems there, it's a big deal. Because these are people flying in and out of New York City, one of the most populous areas in the United States, and also where lots of really important business gets done, you know? Sure.
We've all been there.
We've all been to New York, not lived there yet. But Newark Airport is interesting because you've got three airports in that immediate area. You've got JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark. When something goes down there at one of those three big airports, it's going to have a knock-on effect for all of the other airports where those flights fly out to. And we're talking hundreds and hundreds of flights per day. So, again, dominoes here. What happened at TRACON is pretty scary. The air traffic controllers on April 28th lost communications with the systems that they used to see all of the planes in the sky. For only 90 seconds, but 90 seconds of not being able to know where any flight is. And what do those air traffic controllers do, Ben?
Oh, they control air traffic for 100, Alex.
Yes. Yeah. They work with the pilots to set forth flight plans and make sure all of the flights don't hit each other, to make sure that each landing strip is only being used by one plane at one time. And that each of the planes then taxiing are not going to be running into each other. It's huge.
They also actively, now this is not AI run as an industry, they also actively contextualize changes that will affect the future of their airport and past things like delays for weather or mechanical concerns that will affect things in terms of like, look, air traffic controller professionals are, in my opinion, kind of stressed out. And you and I, and maybe Dylan, we both know a few, and they're consummate professionals. They're often in an uphill situation because circumstances change so quickly. You can't really, if you're ATC, you do not have a day where you kick your feet up and just have a nice like matcha or something.
No.
Like you have to be on for a while. And especially if you're working with antiquated equipment, you have to be the eyes in and for the skies. So that 90 seconds you mentioned, Matt, I think this is something all of our aviator friends in the audience are going to be nodding their heads to. That 90 seconds could be 90 seconds of disaster very quickly.
And you are the human beings at the wheel in that case, and you are blind because the technology has decided to crap out, or it didn't decide to. It crapped out for one reason or another. And that wasn't the only problem happening at the airport that day. Let's just get into this again, because we've been talking about the FAA and changes within the federal government and all kinds of issues. Let's jump over to NPR. I'll give you the title here: How Archaic Tech, Staff Shortages, and Construction Made a Meltdown at Newark Airport. And just to read from that first paragraph, by the way, this is heard on Morning Edition there at NPR and written by A. Martinez and Nia Dumas. So here we go. The Newark Airport was dealing with bad weather, staffing shortages, outdated infrastructure, and the airport's busiest runway was closed for renovations until June. So all of that stuff happening together caused such an insane situation for everybody at the airport, not just the air traffic controllers, because their jobs then end up impacting the pilots and the crews. Then those, their jobs end up impacting all the passengers and everybody who's working out on the tarmac. And it just becomes a mess.
And that poor guy in like seat 38E going, I have a connecting flight. I have a connecting flight.
Well, yeah, because people are in that situation. And when you're in that moment, it is the most important thing in the world in that moment is to get on the next flight.
Yeah, sorry, child slavery. There are other priorities.
Well, it's true. Unfortunately, I think that's maybe just how humans function. When we're in that moment, it's just, that's all that matters. So this all occurred. A bunch of the human beings, the air traffic controllers that were there at TRACON, ended up taking time off after that day on April 28th. And they took, because they're allowed to take time off when there's something like crazy traumatic, something big happens at work.
Like a mental wellness day.
Yes, exactly. Because you cannot be on the job if you're not feeling good to go, as you alluded to earlier, Ben. So then that all happened. It was all in the news. Everybody's writing about it, including NPR there on May 7th. Then it happens again on Friday, May 9th. Another 90 seconds that they have no access to radar and the systems. That thankfully occurred at 3:55 a.m., which is a very low traffic time. Right. So not as bad, but still something's going wrong with the radar systems there over at Philadelphia Terminal Radar Approach Control.
Which means that if authorities are not able to isolate and identify wherever this hiccup is occurring, it will inevitably shenan again.
Yeah, there you go. And guess what it did? It shenaned again.
Oh my gosh.
On May 11th.
Right.
Again, it was a radar outage. So it's a scary thing considering what we read about. There was a story where a Black Hawk helicopter accidentally intercepted an incoming flight and everybody died. Other issues that, the industry is having with Boeing planes, with other planes.
A lot of close calls with small private aircraft, like picture your Cessnas as well. That's happening. We know that there was chaos at Heathrow not too long ago. One thing I think we need to establish on the air right now, on the air and in the air right now, is the following. At this point in the investigation, there is no hard suspicion of bad faith actors. this does appear to be a consequence of legacy technology, a consequence of lack of maintenance and updates and improvements, and arguably a consequence of, not looking out for the ATC.
Yeah. Well, and you can read all of the official statements from the FAA over on the FAA.gov website. Check it out. They've got statements on every one of these moments that occurred. And, it's going over basically exactly what happened here. And it has a lot to do with staffing. But again, their last statement that they put out on May 13th is all about, hey, we've got 22 fully certified controllers. We got 5 fully certified supervisors and 21 controllers and supervisors in training. So they are doing their best as, a company, as a group, an organization, to bring up more people to be in that position to fill in when something goes wrong on the human side. But when it comes to the
relay
tech
system,
they need huge updates, and they need funding to make those huge updates. So we'll see how all of that plays out politically over the next year or so, probably.
Which is a bummer, because tech has no religion nor ideology just yet, depending on how AGI goes and how it feels about itself, I imagine. But I appreciate that point, and I think it's crucial that we make that point now. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy was talking on May 12th to reporters and said, look, we know what went wrong. To the earlier point, he said there's a relay system feeding data from New York to Philly, and that relay system failed. And that is part of this domino effect, this chain of sus tech, right? Sus tech. Sounds like it should be a word. But, but anyway, it's the new Spy Kids. So right now, as I'm catching up with all this stuff too, actually delaying a flight to the Northeast, Newark Airport is under a ground delay now as we record on Wednesday, May 14th, but it's due this time to weather. There are low cloud ceilings.
Yeah. Weather, there are low cloud seedings. Seedings is what I heard too, but that's
cloud seedings. I like it. This is why we hang out. All right.
Oh, dude. Last thing, Ben, I just want to put in here. This is more stuff from, who is this? This is from the FAA specifically, but Secretary Duffy, Transportation Secretary Duffy, has stated there's all kinds of things that need to happen. They're going to add new high bandwidth telecommunications connections between these things called the STARS system. I don't understand exactly what the STARS system is at this moment. I'm sure we can look that up. They're going to replace copper telecommunications connections with updated fiber optic tech. Hey, that's a good idea.
Sure.
And they're putting in a temporary backup system, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where, it's announced as good news, but the implication is a little bit spoopy doop, right? It's like hearing local fire department to have hoses installed on trucks. And you're like, great, guys, that's awesome. Also, what?
We just had a bunch of straws before. We did our best.
Right. We have no backup system. We do also know, of course, that current civilization depends upon safe air travel. It depends upon safe air transit if people don't care for the travel aspect of it. I imagine that we are going to see more work in this case, and I'm going to be cynical about why I believe these problems will be fixed. Would you like to hear it?
Yes.
Because wealthy people use planes.
You're right. But do they fly out of Newark is the question. I mean,
right. Do they fly? Do they fly commercial? Maybe not, but the truly wealthy own a big interest in the function of commercial airlines, and from a defense perspective, which we don't really talk about, the United States will never abandon its own ability to manufacture aircraft. You know what I mean? And to hold that infrastructure sacrosanct.
We'll also just start ordering them all from Qatar.
Oh boy.
They'll still be Boeing planes though.
They'll be about 13 years old if I'm read up on that.
Yeah.
But then you have to consider we're going to move on. We're going to hear later from a couple fellow conspiracy realists in the aviation field who have their own thoughts on air traffic control in particular. So please tune in later this week. In the meantime, Matt, Dylan, before we head off to catch a flight to Newark, should we do a ad?
Yeah.
We have returned, and we are going to stay in Newark for the moment. We're going to run through several stories quickly, but while we're doing this, we're going to follow kind of a thematic thread that is very important to Matt Dillon and yours truly. Our first story is the following. This happened pretty recently, earlier this month. The mayor of Newark, a town we just mentioned, was arrested at an immigration detention facility where he was, according to various perspectives, he was protesting. So the idea is that the mayor, Ras Baraka, was arrested Friday, and he had been protesting the opening of this immigration detention center. We'll give you more details in a second, but we need to understand that the narrative diverges very quickly because this ICE detention facility, immigration detention facility, it's not its first rodeo. It was reopened. It's Delaney Hall, if you want to look it up, Delaney. And supporters of investigating this facility, notice the diplomatic language there, are saying that the mayor was not protesting, that the mayor was legally investigating this structure, this compound. And right now, Baraka is running to succeed Governor Phil Murphy. So he has higher political ambitions. He has been involved with the great state-by-state contention, I would say, over the immigration issue. And he aggressively pushed back on the idea of opening or reopening this center. He said it doesn't square with building permits, which is kind of a matrix dodge of larger moral contentions. He was literally arrested. Federal officials blocked his entry when he went in with 3 other members of a congressional delegation from New Jersey. That would be Representatives, respectively, Robert Menendez, LaMonica McIver, and Bonnie Watson Coleman. So the feds say, you can't come in here. There is what corporate America would call a healthy conversation, and what everyone else would call people shouting at each other and yelling and pushing. And then this is reported by Viri Martinez, who is an activist associated with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. Martinez says there was yelling and pushing, quote, then the officers swarmed Baraka. They threw one of the organizers to the ground. They put Baraka, again, the mayor of Newark, in handcuffs and put him in an unmarked car. Look, this is historically, nobody wants to hear this, but this is historically not the first time a mayor in a city in the United States has been arrested. However, I want to throw to you here, Matt, for your thoughts. However, we can see why this might give some people the jimmies. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, you don't go after the mayor. You say, Mr. Mayor, please, we need you to stop doing this. Please, Mr. Mayor. Like, as in you're talking to an authority figure. But when you've got federal agents or people working at a federal level who come out and arrest a major city's mayor, the picture it paints is that, I don't know what.
So that's the issue, because, okay, let's apolitically, just with some critical thought, let's walk through this. As we said earlier, there are four, what'd you say, authority figures, right? A mayor, three reps. So why is only the mayor arrested? Why do the narratives differ? If we look toward a statement by Department of Homeland Security, they said the lawmakers had not asked in advance for a tour of the facility. They also did not respond to that question about why only the mayor was arrested. They did, however, say the following, quote, or through a spokesperson, quote, members of Congress are not above the law. We can agree with that, and cannot illegally break into detention facilities. Okay, sure, fine. No one can. Had these members requested a tour, we would have facilitated a tour. So it's kind of like, I guess in their logic, it's like a fancy restaurant that doesn't take walk-ins.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of true, right? If you have a detention center, you don't want people, just anybody coming in and out of it. Like if it's a federal detention center, I can imagine you want to lock that place down because of the very nature of the place that it is, right? But these are important individuals, who operate the city and the state that this facility is operating within. So it does feel like you wouldn't. I don't know, man. It makes me think of, I think it was listener mail the other day. We were talking about one of the executive orders that was put out about strengthening and unleashing the law enforcement in America.
Right.
And there's that one little piece in there about local leaders, and when local leaders demonize or cast aspersions or prevent law enforcement from being able to operate the way we want them to on a federal level, they will be prosecuted, essentially.
Right.
So it makes me think of that, like maybe the very protest, or the very concept of protesting an ICE facility like that. It doesn't matter who's operating it, what private company is like in charge there. It's going to be seen as an act of aggression against probably the administration.
Sure. Yes. Also, the logical conundrum, right? The bag of badgers here is what counts as a protest versus what counts as not only the legal rights, but the legal duties of representatives of the people, right? All of these folks, the mayor and the reps, they were elected by their constituents, which means that they have, beat me here, Dylan, they have certain they are required to do, theoretically. It's no secret that politicians often fall short of doing what they are supposed to be doing. But this, I think, exists, to your point, Matt, your beautiful point earlier, this exists in a larger context because at the same time, the United States is seeing signals that are kind of anti-habeas corpus. You remember habeas corpus?
Huh. Sounds familiar. Something about a body?
Yeah, if you have the body, right? So the idea is that if you are locked up, you are imprisoned, you are able to, I guess the diplomatic way to put it, we are not lawyers. The diplomatic way to put it is, in this country, you have a right to appear in a court. You have a right to go to a judge because they have your body. In every sense, you have a right to go like, hey, why am I here? Why me? What'd I do? Right? Did I spit out chewing gum in Singapore? Because I thought this was America. And then the judge is like, oh, awesome, sick line.
He said, yes, this is America.
Right. So people are also, this is the next story, people are also worried by what they see as signals that the current administration is going to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, the protection against unlawful detention or imprisonment, which is enshrined in the Constitution.
This is new to me.
Yeah, there's a guy from earlier named Stephen Miller who got into the news with some of this stuff. And their idea here, we'll give you a quote from Miller when he's talking to reporters outside of the White House quite recently. He says, quote, "The Constitution is clear. The privilege, not the right, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of," get this, Matt, "invasion." So to say it's an option we're actively looking at, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not.
Oh, God.
It's a nice constitution you have there. You'd be ashamed something happened to it.
It's what it feels like. The language in there. You don't have to have a character. You don't have anything. Just the language. Ugh.
Yeah. Privilege, option we're actively looking at, whether the courts do the right thing or not.
A time of invasion. You clocked that, man. That is... Whew. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, Stephen Miller is not himself the president of the United States. So that is a high-level political official saying something on behalf of the administration. But it's not the same thing as, the current president saying, what's all this complicated language?
Dude.
It's got we're both kind of doing the stink face and not the cool stink face that you do when you hear good rap.
No. That is a distinct stink face. This is feeling gross. Well, should we connect this? I know there's more to talk about there, but should we connect it to the recent Department of Agriculture thing?
We absolutely should. You mind reader. We've got to talk about Department of Ag, and I think that'll get us into some resource conversations that you and I are very much looking forward to.
Oh my gosh, yes. All right, well, let's jump into it. Again, jumping to NPR, who is actively losing their federal funding as we speak. Which is an interesting, that's a whole other discussion to have, just that concept that there's state-sponsored media in some way, even though there are mostly donations, but it is a potential conflict of interest and always has been with NPR. And however, they always
PBS.
Yes, exactly. They do always seem to be, I don't know, independent-ish with a little bit of slant. Anyway, okay, so...
Wait. Also, folks, behind the curtain, cut to several years earlier when Matt and I used to party and we're like 3 beers deep and one of us is going, Big Bird is propaganda.
Yeah, it's true. But then also quoting stuff that's on Morning Edition, so we're just like, we're just trying to, we're trying to do our best, just like everybody else, just to figure out what the heck is happening at any time. So what is happening now, at least according to NPR, and some let's say some internal stuff that keeps getting leaked. I don't know if we've all noticed this, but internal machinations that are occurring within the administration get leaked all the time. Internal emails, according to a person who can't be named. It's all happening right now, and there's a ton of leaked information.
An anonymous source familiar with the conversation.
Yes.
Off the record said.
Talking about the Department of Agriculture, quote, demanding states hand over personal data of food assistance recipients, including social security numbers, addresses, and in at least one state, citizenship status.
Right.
These are according to emails shared with NPR by an official who, quote, was not allowed to speak publicly.
Cool. But was clearly allowed to speak to a reporter. This is such a leaky boat, man, right now. Just on the OPSEC, this is wild. It's also, it's an interesting contradiction, is it not? Because the existing ideology would argue that every citizen has a degree of privacy and liberty, right? The art of small government and so on. Your jurisdiction stops where my nose begins, that kind of thing. However, we can understand why people would see this as counterintuitive to request a new, more invasive wave of personal information from people who did not have to provide that in the beginning. Or, I guess, you know what? Let's be fair. Let's be objective. if you receive food assistance like EBT or whatever the program may be, WIC vouchers and so on,
SNAP and all that.
SNAP and all that, yeah, you already have to jump through many hoops to get there. You know what I mean? You can't just walk into the Snap Shack and say, I want SNAP. And they're like, oh, cool, thanks for coming. No, they want to know stuff about you already. You have to prove that you need it. And sometimes those standards, state by state, are already extremely rigorous, right?
Yep.
Some would say unfairly so, based on inflation data. So what is the concern here? And also, Matt, we have to mention it's not just the USDA. There's another hand at play, right? One of the newest initiatives, agency-wise.
Oh wait, which one? I know USDA. What's the other one?
Oh, it's the Department of Governmental Efficiency. Department of Government Efficiency. We can't dodge it. We can't dodge it, man.
Oh, geez. Okay, yeah. That would make sense why they're looking for it. So let's talk about why it's a big deal. The SNAP program, or Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, is administered on a state-by-state basis, which means Georgia, here where we are, controls all of the SNAP money that goes out to people who qualify in Georgia, and it goes the same all the way across all the states. For a federal program to come in, a federal organization to come in, specifically DOGE, to be asking questions about citizenship status feels off, considering all of the other stuff that is happening right now with immigration, with citizenship status, with deporting people to places like Libya, and or that may have been shut down. Who knows? Just with all of this stuff happening, having that specific organization, DOGE, looking at that stuff feels like a red flag. Like, look out. They're looking for more people to just launch out of the United States. It is one thing that should be known here is that someone who does not have official citizenship status within the U.S. cannot qualify for SNAP in any of the states.
Right.
But if you are a non-citizen parent of a child who is a U.S. citizen, you can qualify, which makes me think that is specifically what the organization is looking for. Okay,
so that's sort of the chain of operation, is to identify those people.
That's my that's my take on looking at it in the wider picture.
I don't think it's a bridge too far, and I can see the argument there, and without sounding, reductive and without at the same time sounding highfalutin, the hard reality of the situation here is that every human being is reliant upon nutrition and sustenance, such that it should, in a better world, be considered a human right. And from what I understand, the argument against guaranteeing those rights for people in these United States is saying that they are not a part of the United States, which I find similarly weird. I would just, Checkers had it right. The guys who wrote "You Gotta Eat," an amazing tagline that's quite honest about the quality of Checkers as a fast food institution. Maybe they should have had a hand in writing some of the Constitution. You know what I mean? It's an inescapable fact that if a population starves, then instability spikes. And we see that again and again. So the question is this a good thing long term? Is this a short-sighted, look at us, we're doing something, getting a headline kind of thing? Maybe.
I want to point to one thing that NPR points to as well, and that is an executive order that was put forward on March 20th titled "Stopping Waste, Fraud, and Abuse by Eliminating Information Silos."
Mm-hmm.
And, we've talked about siloing of information on the show before, a lot of it in the context of the black budget programs, the programs that, are special access, those things where only a few people actually know what's happening in that area, but there's still a bunch of money that gets allocated to that area. Nobody gets to see what happens to that money, but a few.
Unless you're on the list for the admission into those underground cities.
Yes, and undersea bases. I'm joking a little bit about that, maybe. But
30% joking.
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
you well.
But in this case, it could be seen as the SNAP programs on a state-by-state basis receive federal funding to the tune of around $100 billion a year. So that's not every state, that's all states combined. It could be seen that the federal government wants to see where that money goes and how it is spent.
Sure. And I think that's quite objective to say. There is nothing wrong with accountability here. We also, at the same time, acknowledge fairly valid concerns that this would have an ulterior motive. The language is already what we call dog whistly. And, the funny thing about this is, Matt, Dylan, friends and neighbors, the funny thing about this is that if we're so worried about spending money in one place, and we're so profligate, right? Spending money on foolish errands in other parts of expenditure or the federal budget. The good news is that the U.S. might come into a lot of money that has just been sitting in the ground. So why are we so worried, right? About buying some poor kid, I'll say it, not great cheese and milk, and it's not the top tier groceries is all I'm saying. These kids aren't eating crab legs. But if we are so worried about money, then shouldn't we as a nation be excited about the 1.5 trillion estimated dollars worth of lithium recently discovered?
Oh, we should be so excited. We should be
stoked.
so stoked that we probably should take an ad break to celebrate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a celebrate. And we're back. There are some things that we have been tracking over a series of years. You may have heard us mention it recently. We were talking off air. We couldn't remember if this was one of our on-air conversations or just us hanging out. But we are both over the moon, over the mountain, over the moon, to again explore the 1.5 trillion US dollars estimated of lithium discovered right here in these United States, occurring at a time when China and the US are super beefed up and conspiring against each other, clearly, to figure out who helms the wheel of power. Right now, just so you know, if you're talking about resources and you're talking about rare earth minerals and other things that make your electronics go elec, then you are going to see that China is the clear winner, not just for resource access, but for processing. So, Matt, can we talk a little bit more about, I love the line you had there, volcanic white gold. Used to be Dylan's street name back in Knoxville.
Volcanic white gold?
Yeah, it was a different genre. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about it. We talked about the value of these deposits, or this deposit. The volume is thought to be somewhere between 20 and 40 million metric tons. That's a lot of lithium, and that can make a lot of electronics, or at least it can be helpful in making a lot of electronics, specifically batteries. How many pounds of lithium are in a Tesla Model S?
Ooh, how many? I don't know.
Around 138.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a Model S. That is not the most common one you're going to see on the roads.
Yeah.
That is the amount you will find in Dan's car. So, if he's listening still, probably not. But if he is, that's how many pounds of lithium are in your car, Dan.
Now I remember, because that's the first thing he said about that car.
Yeah.
You guys like lithium? Check this out.
But, all electric vehicles, anything that uses a lithium ion battery has a certain amount of lithium in it. And nowadays, That's a lot of things in our lives.
Sure. Yes. That is why this is as mission critical as a petroleum or fossil fuel supply or a uranium supply. The issue is the pickle, the bag of badgers at play that we mentioned earlier. This will be familiar to anybody in oil or nuclear processing industries. It is important to have access to the raw material, right? And wars have been launched and probably will launch in the future for access to any raw resource. However, the more important step is processing, or the equally important step. So the reason that China is, by all metrics, the world leader in rare earth minerals, it's about 50% because of access to raw materials through various agreements with other countries. But it is the other 50% is the lack of environmental regulation. Here in the U.S., environmental regulation and conservation policies prevent the cheap processing of these materials, right? I mean, right now, if you dig into this, because we're fun at parties, right? We know that the U.S. is fast-tracking permits for new uranium mining operations in Utah. Mining the uranium is not the same thing as processing or enriching. It's just getting that stuff out of the ground. And the United States has some surprising blind spots when it comes to processing rare earth minerals, nuclear materials, right? They often are going to be functioning in concert with foreign-owned consortiums, right? We've got like a few, maybe, deals with the mission critical need to process uranium. We also know that there is a hidden history to the United States regarding how best to access and control resources in this huge country. I mean, if you haven't been here, no offense, I hate when people say this, but if you haven't been here, if you haven't taken a road trip to the U.S., you don't get it. This place is spooky huge, and it's arguably a haunted house. There's a lot of stuff here. And for the indigenous peoples who were living happily for thousands and thousands of years before the U.S. became a thing, the presence of precious materials like fossil fuels or uranium has long been seen as the impetus toward evil actions on behalf of the government. We talked about this in our conversations with Leonard Peltier.
We did.
Sorry, I TED talked there. I just feel like we have to establish that stuff. Yeah.
It was great. I am thinking about what happens to this area. I just looked up McDermott, Nevada, and Malheur County, Oregon, and like where this is. So it's in
the lithium.
Yeah, I'm still on lithium. I'm like kind of focused in on this because the concept of this rather open area where there's not a lot of civilization going on out there. There aren't even many roads at all. So in order to set up the stuff that we're talking about, to get the lithium out, to then go into the processing, to then, going into specific lands and all of these things, there's going to be so much development that has to occur before anything else can occur. And it's going to change. Yeah, it's going to change everything, and it's going to impact everyone. And it's that tough thing, right? You need the resources that you're talking about, but then it affects so many things.
Yeah, it affects biodiversity, which, some people care about more than others, but it also affects things like access to clean water, which becomes very dangerous very quickly. And we see precedent for this both in uranium processing and indeed in lithium processing earlier in Nevada. Nevada. You say Nevada if you're in Nevada.
Oh, crap. No. I always say Nevada. I don't know why.
We're just going to say NV.
Yeah.
You guys know what it is. Vegas rules, baby. But yeah, this is a game changer. And it seems that the economic and security advantages on the table make it easy to say yes to conditions that would ordinarily be a deal breaker for pretty much any presidential administration. It's easy to dismiss folks you might not agree with and call them entirely villainous, but we have to understand the principal axiom of game theory and resource extraction is that everyone involved, whether you like them or not, is a rational actor. So the best way to approach this, especially if anybody's got some political ideology or preconceptions in the conversation, we get it, we respect you. The best way to approach this is to consider the counterfactual. What if this is not extracted? What if these resources are not exploited? What happens when you can't get your new phone, bro? What happens when the jets don't fly?
We all get super cranky is what happens.
Which is going to be funny because in a future listener mail conversation, we're going to introduce something called the hungry judge effect. Yeah, it's a good teaser, right? We do need to, I think, not to do too much Black Monday murder stuff, but we do have an episode ahead, maybe about the new wave of resource extraction, right? It carved out the insidious boundaries of colonial North Africa and the Middle East. It carved out a great deal Southeast Asia and indeed Latin America. So this is a conspiracy, a nest of conspiracies, a rat king of conspiracies that continues in the modern day. And it's crazy how it's not more widely reported.
Yeah, I agree. Before we get out of here, Ben, let's just touch on the other two that we found. I think it was two other specific mineral deposits that were located recently or that are in the news. The uranium one. Mm-hmm. The uranium one freaks me out a little bit because, as we all know, radioactive materials, when they're in the earth, pretty safe. Deep in the earth, we're not going to harm anybody. They've already kind of got their own thing going on. Water moves around in different ways. Not a big deal. But as soon as you start drilling a bunch of uranium out of the earth, humans then, wildlife, we all got problems. Why do we need all that uranium?
I'd like to quote a good friend of ours. They delved too greedily and too deep and disturbed that from which they fled, Durin's bane. So shout out to our buddy Gandalf. But there is truth in that parable, even though again it's Lord of the Rings is not about nuclear power. You're absolutely right, Matt. What a pickle, because is the worst possible outcome not having uranium? And what happens to the people on the ground, right? Like the same question with indigenous people who had their rights promised and then betrayed, all for resource access, by the way. Like not like political ideology was the cape and the cap that they put over resource extraction. I don't know, man. We also we have to talk about it, dude. Before we go, we promise we're going to end on one good or interesting thing we need your thoughts on. But before we get to that light at the end of the tunnel, man, have you looked up the Wiki Travel or the CIA World Factbook entry for Somalia?
I have the fact book. I need to go look it up. But I heard a little rumor that maybe somebody else found a bunch of something in Somalia.
I like how we're setting it up like the beginning of a board game of Clue, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, man. Give us the quick skinny as we're heading out. Our friends at Turkey have established, they've always had, honestly, a little bit of interest in Somalia, as have, the U.S., Russia, and to a lesser degree, China. But could you tell us a little bit about what Turkey found as they started digging?
Yep. They found 20 billion with a B, billion barrels of crude oil there in Somalia. We have seen and discussed before about oil drilling and oil extraction in many parts of Africa and what that actually looks like, the human labor and the sites and the devastation to surrounding areas that occur in, again, not specifically in Somalia, but in many parts of Africa where a third party comes in, let's say with a little less regard for the humanity and wildlife that's there, and just pulls oil out of the ground as quickly and kind of as roughly as possible. It is pretty worrisome. It is also strange to think about what other powers might be thinking when they see 20 billion barrels of oil just sitting there in the ground that anybody could take if they were in control.
Yeah. Just make the deal with the right pirates and warlords, right? And also, what role does Somaliland play, which is more stable and is yet to be acknowledged by the United Nations, arguably because it is more convenient to Western powers for chaos to reign. This also happens on the heels of an earlier agreement in 2024. We're going to do some red string theory here. Turkey signed 2 major deals with Somalia. They have also been putting their hands in the cookie jar with the resource conflict in Rwanda and the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. As a matter of fact, we just learned 2 weeks ago, but I think it got publicly announced after that, that Turkey wanted to mediate, quote unquote, between those 2 countries. And both of those countries said, heck no. For whatever reasons they may have. But the reason we're bringing up, without getting too into the weeds here, the reason we're bringing this stuff up is because it's important to realize when we're talking about this level of resource, this threshold of economic potential, the news is announced far after those conversations begin, way far after.
Yep.
Maybe that's what we should do. What if the next headline is something like, "Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, the podcast discovers $3 trillion worth of," what's an obscure but valuable element?
Vanadium? No, I don't know.
Vanadium.
Vanadium, that is one, I think.
It's obscure for sure.
It's used in battery production, a bunch of other stuff.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do if this show doesn't work out. And while civilization is falling, we promised you, we'll have more on this. I do think it's an episode. I think we're on board with that. We wanted to tell you one cool thing, one future thing as we end tonight's Strange News program. We talked about it over these many years, and we always talked about it kind of as a thought experiment. But Matt, great news. Dylan, great news. You playing along at home, great news. Some actual scientists have also started asking whether octopuses could create the next iteration of civilization. So now it's not just us. Now it's an actual biologist, Tim Coulson, PhD, University of Oxford. We don't know if he listens to the show, but he was thinking about this too.
Well, I love it. The idea that they can live in a range of different environments. They come in so many varieties. They live in deep ocean. They live in coastal shallows.
They use tools.
Yeah. Oh.
There's that really fascinating. Okay, so the big problem with this, and longtime listeners, you know this, the big problem with the octopus replacing humans in a civilization, like in a post-human world, is going to go down to 2 primary things. The first thing is they have very short lifespans, quite attenuated, and that's partially due to a kill switch that occurs when they reproduce. There was some very interesting research in the 1970s that found you can extend the lifespan of an octopus with the following caveats. It has to be a female octopus, and you have to conduct essentially a kind of lobotomy, a kind of brain surgery. You have to remove the part of the organism that induces that kill switch. But if you do that, you can allow the octopus to live longer, apparently without too many terrible effects on its cognition. The second issue that has always bedeviled waterborne organisms is that chemical discoveries, all the hits like fire and acid and all that stuff. Fire in particular is a very difficult proposition for an underwater society to discover. All to say, I think it would be cool, but, those are the two big issues that our octopus friends need to figure out.
They need to figure out how to work together too, right? That was a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Pretty solitary and will even cannibalize each other every once in a while.
Yeah. But they have been found using tools and creating little octopus suburbs.
That's pretty
in different parts.
nifty.
But again, to your excellent point about the environment, surviving in an environment is not the same as thriving in an environment. I'm all for more octopus brain surgery, and I think I'm going to go ahead on record. I think everybody else should be on board with this too. I am making a greater good argument. I am aware of how dangerous those arguments become. And I'm kind of kidding because, there are ethical boundaries against that kind of experimentation.
Well, I don't think we're going to have to. I think we're talking about timescale stuff here, Ben. I think nuclear winter sets in, 2030-ish, something like that. Then, humanity slowly dwindles out. And then those octopuses, they got millions and millions and millions of years to get where they need to get, build those underwater metropolises that then get discovered by some other species that has USO technology.
There we go. There's so much more to get to. We are running out of time. So before Dylan, the Tennessee pal, goes full volcanic white gold on us, we are going to call it an evening. We can't wait to hear from you. Please tune in later this week. We're following up in some of these conversations with your fellow conspiracy realist on our listener mail program. In the meantime, if you'd like to be part of the show, especially if you happen to be an octopus listening to podcasts, we would love to hear from you. You can find us online on Instagram, YouTube, etc. All the social medias people sip. We are Conspiracy Stuff Show, or some derivation thereof. You can also give us a line at our good old-fashioned email address or call us on the phone.
Our phone number is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname and let us know in the message if we can use your name and message on the air. If you'd like to send us an email, we are
the entities that read each piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.